Welcome everyone to the Into the Shark Tank webinar today. We are so pleased to be here for the 2022 Design Challenge Into the Shark Tank. This is a great webinar because we're going to get some perspectives that are unique and not Amanda or I's perspectives. So some different perspective as we head into the competition event. So I'm Rachel Romero, I'm your competition manager. I have Amanda Kirkby with me here today as your assistant competition manager. And we are pleased to have some guest speakers today. Carol Marriott is a past Solar Decathlon Design Challenge Division Juror, as well as Kyle White, who is a 2021 grand winner. He was the student team lead, and we'll hear from both of them. But to kick off, we'll get started with some initial information. So incredibly, we are at the end of this journey, but there's still a lot of amazing things to come. So we've grayed out most of this timeline. We have one more check-in next week. We hope you'll join us for that with your final questions, and we'll have a few last-minute details to share with you. Your final presentation is due April 9th. Competition event. This is where winners will be selected. You'll be presenting your projects to our wonderful jurors, where you'll gain valuable feedback on your projects. And this is just going to be a great opportunity to connect with your peers and industry leaders. We're excited to host both on-site participants and our virtual participants. And we're excited to have that very hybrid agenda. And we have excellent groups registered for both on-site and virtual. So I'm very excited about that. We do have a couple of exhibition teams. So these teams get to participate virtually in the competition event, and I hope our exhibition teams will connect with peers. We'll have an opportunity to present to leading industry experts following the competition event for feedback, and we're appreciative to those teams that have continued in the competition. As always, non-finalist teams who complete the final deliverables, which are our exhibition teams, are invited to attend the competition event virtually. So all are invited virtually, and we're pleased to offer that this year. Moving on, quick reminder, as you'll see in many of our pictures, kind of like a dress code if you have questions about it, but Saturday division presentations are business casual. We'd recommend that or better. It's very up to you. Some of our teams get creative and have team shirts, but business casuals or better is the standard for Saturday. Sunday award ceremony is business professional, and we have a great picture here to show you what we kind of mean by that. It is an award ceremony. We're so excited. There'll be lots of pictures, and we want to make sure that you shine when you get your picture taken. So let us know if you have any questions on that. Next is exhibits. This is optional if you would like to bring an exhibit on site with you. An exhibit could be anything such as a scale model, a design element model, such as a wall section, maybe a house section. We've seen a whole scale of things in this area. It could be any other physical exhibit that is related to your project. We've had 3D printed homes, all kinds of creative things, and we really leave that up to you if you want to bring that, but it is not required. We have posted exhibit guidance under the quick links on the project site. So if you please take a few minutes to review that, and then we'd love to answer questions at our check-in next week or via email. So with that, Amanda is going to tell us a little bit about division presentations.
Yeah, what you've all been waiting for. So division presentations at the Solar Decathlon competition event. It can be performed either virtually or on site. And the format will be an 8-minute live presentation followed by 15 minutes Q&A with your jurors. And then division jurors will evaluate your presentation based on those criteria and the rules. So be sure to read the rules again and again, as we've said throughout the competition. And a few best practices preparing for that presentation are your slides are due on April 19th via that box submission link. So please be sure to submit on time, and those slides will be what we use during the division presentations. We'll have them on hand here on site and sharing for you. And they will be the same slides if you're selected or your team is selected as a division winner. You will use those same slide deck for the grand juror presentations on Sunday. A few best practices here: use clean, clear imagery to emphasize key points. No pre-recorded presentations will be allowed, and please do not embed any audio for our sound systems here. Or not, we won't have any audio availability for that, either virtually or on site. Animated and other visuals are okay. You can include that in your slide decks. And as you're developing your slides and presentations and practicing, think about how do you make your project stand out? Think about your audience. And here are a few more best practices to help guide that development of your presentation. So develop a clean professional slide template and use visuals to emphasize clear, succinct points. We've seen a lot of great presentations, especially at the semifinals event back in February. So a lot of our teams are well on their way to having a successful division presentation, but emphasizing that of making clear, clean visuals to help your jurors understand your key points. Dress the part and arrive early, whether you're on site or attending virtually. This really drives across that professional that you're there to compete and have a presence during your presentation. Also, know your jurors' expertise. We've posted the juror profiles on the Solar Decathlon website, and those profiles, you can find that link in the project site. So know your jurors, know their expertise, and play to those specific points in your presentation. Also strategize for the question and answer period. This can be whatever works best for your teams, but developing a strategy so when you get those questions that might be a little intimidating at first, you have a strategy to tackle those effectively. And finally, practice, 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 practice in a hybrid format. We'll have some jurors attending virtually, some in person. We'll have students presenting virtually and in person jurors. So practicing that hybrid format, knowing what it looks like from both the in-person and the virtual perspective is really going to help your team be effective and make an impact on the jurors. So with those key best practices, we'll take it to our first guest speaker, who is Kyle White with the University of Oregon's 2021 Design Challenge Commercial Grand Winner team. And with that, we'll hear from the student perspective of how to effectively jump into the Shark Tank. Kyle, take it away.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you. Well, hi, everyone on the, who's attending the call. I know it's been a rough and tiresome road, probably up until this point. I am going to go ahead and share my presentation. Amanda, if you can stop sharing yours, that would be great. Cool, cool. All right. So knowing that you guys have gone through, actually, let me stop sharing that. Sorry. Knowing that you guys have already gone through the sort of craziness that is creating the design and working towards the Solar Decathlon, I wanted to aim this presentation on just some of the advice that I would give for going into this final presentation and how to create that 8-minute slide deck. We do have, I think, Connor here from the UO team, and I will tell you that there's no bias. This is a fair competition, so I'm going to try to be as equally useful to everyone as possible. So let's go ahead and do this. All right, so hopefully that looks all right. Maybe Carol, you can give me a thumbs up. Wonderful. My name is Kyle White, and today this is presenting a take from an architecture student. In trying to provide useful information, I broke down this presentation into kind of three main categories: introduction and understanding the competition. Then two, I think a discussion about branding your own team and understanding how to present that. And then your presentation and dealing with the Q&A and after the fact. So the first step is introductions. So as you might recognize from, I'm sure a lot of the material, my name is Kyle White. So I'm a Master of Architecture student at the University of Oregon. Prior to coming back here, I spent 3 years working professionally at an architecture firm out of Connecticut. And then I had my bachelor's in science and architecture from the University of Hartford in West Hartford, Connecticut. Our team was exceptionally small. Lauren and Jared both joined me on that journey, and Ehab was our faculty advisor and our professor at the time. So that's the UO approach, is to have a very, very small team, but we certainly got to know each other very well over the process and had a, it's a really rewarding experience going through the Solar Decathlon. So all of us being University of Oregon students, the first thing that we kind of recognize is that there is a UO approach. And this might be useful to kind of recognize out of your college, is what is the reputation of your program? And maybe how can you integrate that into your final project presentation? So we as a college focus a lot on the term sustainability and all sorts of different meanings. But we also have this really driven focus on landscapes and more nature-based activities. And we wanted to integrate that into our presentation. It ended up being kind of a major component of our design. So if you can find that for your college, I recommend just kind of reflecting on that a little bit. Secondly is going into the competition. I don't remember the schedule and how things get released, but you should recognize your competition a little bit. We were surprised by the amount of engineering students that were in the competition with us. And so as a team of 3, we knew we had to kind of think smarter instead of having a mass amount of people helping. And so trying to explain that to the jurors and explain in your presentation that you are this team and that, you're a little bit different from these other competitors, I think is a useful understanding to have when talking about your presentation. So that leads me into the next part, which is branding and your own team selection. So overall, a lot of you have already done your graphics and have done your research and have done wonderful designs, I'm sure. And I hope that you're able to create some sort of cohesive color palette or a cohesive graphical theme across all of your documentation. So for us, we had this sort of green UO, mountain background, and then all of our renders and imagery was very green and luscious and full of kind of garden and light, et cetera, et cetera. And so I would say is out of this, if you can kind of weave that in, make it consistent so that a juror knows which team material that is immediately, that's going to be useful. This is an important slide. So there's some major teams out there. We only had 3. There's some that had like 30 and they spent 1.5 years on the competition. So choosing the people who are going to talk and present is critical. So who understands the most material, who can think on their feet, and who can be cohesive, pretty on the spot. So one of those questions is who is going to be talking and how many people are going to be talking, because you don't want 30 different presenters in 8 minutes. So choose people who are going to be able to represent the work the best. And then once you do that, how are you going to divide the presentation? Are you going to take turns going from one person to the next? Is it going to be a cyclical process and kind of wrap around? Or are you going to do the first half is Kyle, the next half is Jared, the third half, which doesn't exist, is Lauren. So this is now the actual presentation. I would say that, I didn't present I didn't present in live, right? I presented online. So it's a little bit different this year, but I think some of the basic fundamentals are there. And these are kind of fundamentals from architecture school as well, as you just kind of learn how to compose yourself and how to present immediately. So the first part is introductions. There's going to be a round of people presenting. And so your first impressions are going to be important. So have energy, have confidence, make sure that when you step on that stage and you start talking, you look calm, collected, and you kind of grab the attention of the audience. Sometimes that feels like you're talking to nobody. The audience doesn't respond, but internally in their own minds, they typically are picking up on these sorts of things. Next is, for us, our site context was really important. And so I would argue for your jurors, they've read a lot of material and they probably know your projects, but if you have something that's unique or important to understand in the context of your design, I would recommend reviewing that and spending time on highlighting that. Because a lot of teams, if you focus purely on engineering, it seems like a math problem rather than a human problem, which is, how buildings are used, right? And I know that's a very architecty way of thinking of it, but the life inside of buildings is what people connect to. And so how can net zero connect to that life inside of the building I think is a way to keep a presentation pretty entertaining. This is an important point. So I put a picture of a puppy up to grab everyone's attention because it's an adorable puppy. But know your project goals when presenting. So for us, you should have a clear thesis statement, a clear point that you're trying to prove with net zero design. So for us, we had this whole pedagogy and discussion around Montessori and how net zero fits with Montessori learning. And so I would say, whatever you discuss in 8 minutes should reinforce this one concise idea. Because at the end of the day, the goal is to say, okay, they're from the University of Oregon, they all wear green, they all make, nice airy renderings, they did all the science, and, their idea is to have this Montessori pedagogy. You're trying to make a packaged brand of your own project. All right. Next, and I only have a few more slides here, but I think hopefully this is useful, is you went through a lot of work, right? And it's hard to display the amount of work and time that you put into this project. And it's always hard because at the end of every project, you look at the deliverable and you go, God, that looks just all right. And you're never 100% confident. So your presentation should have qualifiers that explain how much effort you went through to get here. So you had a huge team of engineers. You say, the team and I spent countless hours iterating the design and redoing the calculations to make sure that we reached net zero via X, Y, and Z. Adding these sorts of qualifying statements will kind of highlight the accomplishment that is this process and is this project. So like if you have more of a story about like crisis recovery after a wildfire or something, talk about a personal experience, grab people's attention that way. Graphics are your strength, maybe let it sit there. If you're worried about net zero schools or net zero buildings not being engaging enough or not popular enough in the country, and that's something you're trying to address, discuss the cost benefits, highlight and support that main concept and idea. Here's a couple notes I think that Amanda and Rachel already kind of covered. So when you present to the jurors, don't read off your script. And if you rehearse too carefully and are a little too flat, that can also be a little disappointing for the jury. Make sure to stand tall and speak to the audience. It's really easy to start looking up at the screen and turn your back accidentally to the audience. And you don't want that. It seems off. And then one trick to prevent that from happening is you can read the back of the room. So don't make eye contact with anyone in the front if you're nervous about presenting. You look at the back wall and you scan the corners, and that allows your eyes to kind of shift and look like you're looking at the room without actually having the nerves of doing that. The last little bit here is the Q&A, right? So it's the unknown. You've presented all this and you've scripted it all out, and then the juror asks something, Carol shows up and she says, something completely bizarre and you have no idea. I think Carol might have asked something of us. I think it was something about like an elevator shaft, or I don't remember, but there was some question I was caught off guard by. And it's their job. So, good on Carol. So the strategy that I recommend is you have the team that just spoke, assign each one of those people to a specific subject and get them to master that knowledge. So even if you're the designer and you didn't do the calculations or part of the calculations, you now are responsible for answering those questions. And so you need to learn all of that material. So really refresh and become masters of certain areas. And then that way you're splitting up the amount of work across the presenting team. And then lastly is wrap this all back to your main concept, right? You're selling that image, you're selling that brand. And I would just try to connect everything back to your one main goal and that one thesis statement. And that is about 11 minutes. So I shall end there. And I hope that was useful for everyone.
If we have any questions for Kyle, feel free to put them in the chat right now, or we have one question already. Will our audience be only jurors, and whom should we keep in focus? We'll hear from a couple of perspectives here, but Kyle, if you want to respond to that, of how you navigated having both jurors and I guess not as much in the virtual environment, having a live audience there, but you want to speak to that, and then
Yeah. So obviously we were online. So our entire, the jury team was kind of our main focus. We had separate rooms for that. But I think out of that, if you can explain things in terms that anyone can understand, that's pretty good practice. So you're obviously focusing on a rubric and kind of trying to win the competition. But if you can state things in understandable ways, if they've never seen your material before, that is universally much better.
And I'll just add to that as like a logistical part of that question is your audience, if you're in person or online, there will be, the jurors are your main audience, and there will be others watching for both. You'll have people online that'll be listening in. You'll have other faculty and your peers and colleagues will be joining in. So, and we're going to be recording. So this lives on, but yeah.
Great question. We have one more question in the chat. In ideal case, you'll have to present twice. First round is with the jurors who have read your material, and the next will be with jurors who won't be aware of that project. And should you prepare two different narratives? And I'll pose that to Kyle. What was your experience being a grand winner and presenting to two different juries?
You might have to refresh me a little bit. I believe the two jury panels were different, were they not?
yes.
Right. So we ended up, and then the second jury, if I also remember, hadn't seen any material.
Correct.
Right. So we did have, I believe, a secondary set of presentation material. It wasn't dramatically different because it's not worthwhile making two separate projects. But I would say that the second set was even more narrowed in to that main point. You know what I mean? So it's like kind of getting rid of some of the technical stuff that, someone who doesn't have that background wouldn't understand. So I would tweak it. I wouldn't restart by any means.
That's great. And I'll just say, from the competition management point of view, the division juries and division presentations looking at the 10 contest parameters, while the grand jurors have a unique set. So it's a slightly smaller set of parameters, and they are assuming that as a first place team,
Okay. Yeah. So yeah. So their voice and their Wi-Fi is cutting a little bit. They might be thrown to you, Carol.
It sounds like they are throwing it to me. That's my picture up there. We
Yep.
can take that down. I'm on camera here. I didn't provide a set of material to kind of go through like Kyle did, and Kyle, you did a great job with your material. So I'm gonna actually, now that I get to go second, I'm gonna edit what I was gonna say a little bit, because I'm just gonna supplement to what Kyle did. And yes, Kyle, unfortunately, I am known for asking tough questions. I don't know how I do it. I really don't. I don't ever intend to. But when I was doing my master's, people would give me like $20 bills at the beginning of presentations to make sure I didn't ask questions. So apparently I'm good at that. To the rest of the jurors here, or to the presentations, the presenters coming up, here's my perspective from being on the jury panel. And this is about you telling us a story, right? Every good presentation comes from telling us a story. And so when you think about a story, it has a beginning, it has a middle, it has an end. The people who get their presentations across and people who get remembered in all of this, they tell a story. So you're going to, it comes back to the same principles. Tell everybody what you're going to tell them, tell them what you told them. And then let's talk about what kind of goes into the middle of that. I'm going to add to what Kyle said. Yes, know your audience. Some of us are engineers. Some of us are architects. I think I got hit on a little bit for being on the engineering side by Kyle. That's okay. We all have a role to play in this. We're all subject matter experts in different areas of the building. But speak to them as such. So if you're the presenter, again, have your area of expertise as you're breaking this up into your groups. This is exactly how Kyle said it too. And make sure you know your material cold. And when it gets to the Q&A, and I do think, not everyone in your group necessarily needs to present. When it gets to the Q&A, it is really useful if you do have a larger group to have somebody who shuttles off each of those questions. So there's not a question of, does Mike answer this? Does Sue answer this? Does Bob answer this? Right? Does Charlene answer that? So having an MC is usually very, very helpful. Everybody on a complex terminology, subject matter, I'll go back to what I learned in school. You should be able to explain it like you're talking to a kindergarten student. Not that you're talking down to anybody, but you should be able to break those technical components, whether they be architectural or engineering, down into a simple format, so that everybody can understand, because the juror may not have the expertise in that particular area you're talking about. So you should be able to break it down, right? That'll make sure you engage your audience in your story by explaining it in really simple terms, okay? And then think about whether the concept you're talking about needs to be talked about from a verbal perspective. Does it need to be talked from a visual perspective, right? Photos are great. A photo speaks 1,000 words. It does so when that concept is better understood from a photo perspective. And then, because I know we're talking to people, not everyone is English as their first language, and we did have some international students, I think, last year. Avoid colloquialisms, keep the language very simple as well, because that can be very helpful. And talking from using Kyle, your example about an Oregon perspective, I always found as a juror, I embrace teams that think about, we did this in this area because this affected New Jersey, and this is why we did it this way. But we also recognize that in other parts of the world, we might do it differently, or in other parts of the country, we might do it differently. Some things are easier done in particular to this competition. If they're done on the West Coast, they're not as easily done in where I'm today, and it is actually snowing outside, Minnesota. Right? It is a lot harder to get to zero energy in Minnesota. So recognizing those factors is really important. I believe one of the challenges we probably gave the team from Oregon last year was, okay, you did that in Oregon. You have a great climate for doing what you're doing. What would you do if you're not in Oregon? And I think the team had to answer that question. You should be prepared to answer that question. In the end, when it comes to your presentation, I love the idea of themes. It really makes your team look professional. Wear a common shirt, wear a common color, whatever is a better way to do that. But I will always come back to a team. Keep it simple. Do not use every available option in PowerPoint as an example. Do not use every special effect that you can to make your presentation grab it. Pick your points, use those special effects, don't do it everywhere. And if you are going to use a special effect that you're not sure whether it's going to work or it has a possibility of failing, have a backup plan. When I was in college, when I did my final presentation, right, I went second after a group. And this is back before we had LCD screens and TVs and we could present our stuff in PowerPoint. Yeah, so I know I don't look that old, but this is back in the time when we could do that. And the team in front of me wanted to come in and use an LCD screen, and it was kind of like all brand new technology, and it didn't work. And the professor got so frustrated. The entire professor, like kind of judging team for our 4th year project, they got so frustrated. And so they turned to our group, which we were number 2, and they said, "Are you ready to go?" And I said, "Yes." And I said, "And here's my deck." And we had a backup plan because we weren't sure if we were going to be able to use these LCD screens. And guess what? We got number 1 because we actually had a backup plan. Keep a logical flow. And again, in every story, there's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end. There's always going to be a logical flow. As a juror, the easiest way for us to keep up with you, easiest way for us to understand your points, ask good questions, keeping it simple, keep that logical flow. Give us the why. Kyle, you started to talk about this a little bit too in your presentation, and I think that's really important, right? We want to know why you made that choice, right? Is there a human element? Is there a theme from your school? Is it something you learned? You know, that's another key part of this. Not only is there the why, what did you learn? As a juror or somebody in the industry, one of the things we constantly are looking at is what did you learn from the problems you encountered, from the material. We're looking that you learned something. Okay. And then I'm back to rinse and repeat. So again, I'm back to the story. You tell them what you're going to tell them. You tell them what you told them, and you rinse and repeat. And that same goes for the practice, right? Amanda talked about this: practice, practice, practice. Know your stuff cold, right? Know it so that you don't have to look at your slide, right? But you are going to still refer to your slide. You're still going to look at it while you're talking to the audience. So those are kind of some of my things that I'm thinking about or have been thinking about and kind of saw from like last year. And I hope that helps as well. And again, I'm open to questions. And Amanda, I think you might still be cutting out a little bit.
Oh, I apologize. We are trying our best today. Thank you, Carol. That was great. Thank you, Kyle. I love you. 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 I love you.
So that's where I want to pause and say, you know, those
Totally
special
gotta mute
effects, those.
the internet.
No, that
Don't
was an
do that.
internet
Hear
thing, but it
us?
almost sounded like a special effect, right?
Can't hear Carol.
Oh no. Oh yeah, they're really lagging, unfortunately. I've never had it lag to a repetitive motion.
That one was unique.
Uh,
Well, Kyle, why don't we read the questions that are coming here? Although I think Amanda might need to answer this one, which is, we have some team members that are joining virtually due to the visitor limit. Can they answer questions? Would it be recommended or should it be avoided?
I mean, I would say sorry, it's a little distracting. I would say it probably depends on how the competition is set up in hybrid, right? So if those who are joining remotely, I would say if they can hear you at the
Backup plan, maybe.
Oh, I think we're good now.
Oh man. You know what? Carol's right. Let's take your advice. Always have a backup plan. I got you, Carol. I got it. All right. Thank you for your perspectives. I appreciate that. You're right on across the board. So one of our questions came in is some of our team members would be joining virtually due to the visitor limit. Can they answer questions? And would it be recommended or should it be avoided? So I'll let Carol answer the second part of it, but I'll answer the first part. Yes, virtual team members can participate in questions. Maybe Kyle and Carol want to answer, would it be recommended or should it be avoided? Thoughts?
I'll give my quick perspective. If it's going to be an issue from a technology point of view, I mean, I think over the last 2 years, we've gotten pretty forgiving about technology. But if it's going to be an issue from a technology point of view, no, because you just want to make sure that everyone gets their answers, and we do have time limits, I think, on questions as well. So it would kind of limit from that perspective in us being able to ask your questions. But what it would, if they are the subject matter expert and they absolutely are the person who should be answering the questions, then, you know, that's probably more important than, you know, worrying about technology. But as long as you have technology solved, I don't think it'll matter one way or the other.
Yeah, and I would just say, I think as long as those who are presenting live can easily interact with those in the chat, that is where I could see that being an issue. Because if you start answering on the podium and then one of your team members, you know, writes in with a completely different metric than what you just said, it suddenly looks very messy. So I'd go on the side of caution and say maybe think about keeping it kind of live response instead.
Great perspective. Thank you. So Carol, do the jurors discuss between each other what questions they'll ask about beforehand? Do you talk about? Nope.
All we do is we determine who's going to go first.
Yep.
So we don't discuss who's going to ask what questions. We all have our areas of expertise, and we ask what sort of feels natural to us.
I love that. And that's where getting to know your jurors is important. And do questions come over the course of the presentation? I'll take that one. There is a distinct presentation time, and that is very strict, just like semifinals. Your time is your time. And then there is a distinct question and answer time, and that is also time limited. So the jurors get to ask their question and they're part of that time, but they also know that they want each of them to get their time. So your answers and the length of your answers depends on that as well. Does anyone want to share perspective in that at all? Yeah, okay. These are great questions from the audience. If you have another question for Carol or Kyle, we'd love to take those. Otherwise, we'll wrap up here. Think about your questions, and we can take maybe one or two, or at the end, we'll cover a few more quick slides and information. So just a reminder, final presentation slides are due April 19th by 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Please submit early. That is your friend is submitting early. And our last team check-in will be next April 12th at 11 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time as well, to get any more questions answered. We always like to say, please follow us on social media and participate and use hashtag Solar Decathlon Design. And we also always want to say thank you to our wonderful sponsors who are making this hybrid event possible. Thank you to our supporting level and contributing level sponsors who contribute so much to Solar Decathlon. I think we have one more question we'll take here. And the question is, can student leaders present or not? Yes, student leaders can present. Every student is allowed to present. No faculty may participate in the presentations. So very specifically, you must be a student to participate.
And
And
if
yep.
I can jump in on one last thing that you just mentioned, submitting early, please, like a day, plan on a day ahead, I would recommend. Because if I remember properly, we tried to submit in the wee hours of the morning, and it took another, I think, like 4 hours to finally get it to all kind of work out. This was a year ago, so it might be fuzzy, but the last thing you want is to come this far and then miss your submission. So please plan ahead.
Yep. That is great perspective. Thank you. A real life instance. Thank you. Thank you to Kyle and Carol and Amanda. Appreciate you all, and we'll talk soon. Thanks.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good luck.
Nice seeing you, Carol.
Yeah, good to see you too, Kyle.
Bye-bye.